Hello and welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to talk to Shashank, who unfortunately is among the people that I like talking to the most. So I hope you will empathize with me. But welcome back again, Shashank. And today we're going to talk about one of your favorite topics, which is basically the future of food.
Hey, thanks for having me, Agno. Yeah, this
Cool.
feeling is mutual.
So let's talk about a few things, right, Shashank? And I have a list of questions here. So if you see me look aside, please, I hope you would excuse me. So let's talk about the landscape today, and how food is grown today, and maybe can you talk about what is the issue with let's say the model, or just the way food works today?
Yeah, sure. So when I think about food, I don't think about just grain or fruits. I think about food as anything that you consume in your body, right? Which would include not only food, fruits and vegetables and grains, but also meat. And when you think about it, any kind of food which has to be grown, it takes up large amounts of land. So for like obviously growing grains like rice, wheat, paddy, whatever, takes up a lot of land. So does your vegetables and fruits. But also when you think about animals, it's not only the animals being confined in a 2x2 area, but rather you have them to graze. You need land to be able to create food for these animals to eat so that they can produce meat later on. So there's a lot of land that gets used. Similarly, all these vegetables and fruits and the food for the animals, the animal feed, require a lot of water. Right? So there's a lot of water being used, a lot of land being used. And given our fruits and vegetables are susceptible to the elements, you start putting in a lot of pesticides, which can be harmful to us as we ultimately consume it, as it leaches into the land. It spoils the land. Also, you put in like growth-inducing substances or make them more resilient. And I'm not talking about, genetically modified, but rather actually like putting in chemicals to like help grow the plant, but it can cause other negative effects, right? So this basically is taking up a lot of resources of the earth, and because of that, right, it is causing a lot of impact to global warming. But the other last part, which is causing a lot of impact to global warming, is the source of the food and the destination, which is your table, is so far off and so disconnected. Transportation, that becomes another factor as well. Storage, it has to go through 3 or 4 different distribution channels. The way these ones are harvested, for example, tomatoes, you're supposed to have ripe sweet tomatoes, but no, you buy them much before it actually gets harvested, so that it ripens during the process. So the actual taste of vegetables also is lost. So these things basically are causing global warming and is fundamentally destroying the planet we love and care.
Yeah. So then, I think you mentioned global warming, Shashank, and I think that's a topic that both of us are very passionate about. So how does global warming affect the current landscape of food and farming and stuff like that?
Right. So I'm going to give you one example of one country, Brazil. Okay. They were supposed to be the largest reservoir or basin of collecting carbon because of the Amazon rainforest. But now, because of how the human population has grown, right, and the farming needs and the food needs of the country, they've had to basically destroy a vast majority of the Amazon rainforest to be able to cultivate food or create land for animals to be fed. Now what happens is this reduces the Amazon's ability to collect carbon. This causes global warming patterns, which then ends up leading to destruction of crops. Like I think it was Chile or Mexico, I'm forgetting one of them, where the harvest of avocados was being hampered because of global warming. So there is a whole bunch of other issues happening now. And then those countries, or maybe even like Brazil itself, has had its issues with their crops being destroyed because of droughts and heavy rains happening simultaneously, which is funny, but that's true. That they end up killing more, destroying more of the Amazon rainforest to be able to farm more, and that's a vicious cycle which we are into, and that ultimately will lead to the doom of the planet.
How can we solve this?
That's such a great question. So it's not like humans have just like said, no, this is happening and let's have a race to the bottom. People are thinking about trying to fix this issue, and the way to fix this, they're like, categorize this into like 4 large categories. One is vertical farming, which allows people to actually farm not in like large swaths of land, but like in buildings closer to urban areas, and be able to produce a lot more in a densely packed space. Second is fundamentally changing the way we have a diet and going back to a more plant-based diet. Over the 20th century, humans have gone from a more plant-based diet to an animal-based diet, and animals-based diet actually consumes a lot more resources of the earth than a plant-based diet. The third one is basically a transition, the same in a plant-based diet, because a lot of humans love meat, is have like plant-based meat like Impossible Foods or like Beyond Burgers and stuff. And the last thing is looking at lab-grown meat, because meat production is very, very resource intensive. So if you can cut out the whole thing and rather have meat grown organically meat grown through a lab-grown process, that would be very, very helpful. So that's how I would say as the 4 main categories of how we could potentially save the planet.
So that's very interesting, Shashank. Can you maybe peel the onion a little more on this and maybe talk a little more about how can vertical farming fix this? Just maybe deep dive a little bit, please.
Sure. So the problem with farming today is because we use a lot of land, right? So the way vertical farming handles this is, imagine you need, say, 100 acres of land to grow lettuce. Rather than using 100 acres of land just to cover that area, if you could grow the same lettuce but stacked up. So imagine you have 10 floors, right, of 10 acres each. So you've literally taken 100 acre land and compacted it into 10 acres. So that's the first way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
But then, because the way plants are grown, they are spread apart, right? Now you can further increase the density and reduce it by another factor of 5. So from a 10 acre land, if you reduce it by a factor of 5, you go from 10 acres to 2 acres. So now think about it. You've gone from a 100 acre land to a 2 acre land, right? So you've already saved 98% of the land, right? The other thing is the way farming works is you have a lot of water that has to get used because it seeps into the ground. This was great, say, 100,000 years ago. But now that we understood how plants grew and stuff, we can start using more modern techniques like hydroponics and aeroponics. Hydroponics lets you save up to 95% water. Aeroponics lets you save up to 98 or 99% water. So now you've saved a lot of resources. And water is important because although Earth is made up of 80%, 75% water, just 3% is fresh water. And of 3%, only 1% is available. The other 2% is in the polar ice caps and the permafrost. So now you've squeezed all that in. So we need that 1% water. So if you can reduce the land use by like 98%, water use by 95 to 99%, you've already saved huge chunks of resources. So going back to the Amazon rainforest, you could replant the Amazon rainforest and get it back to become a carbon sink, right? The other thing which is great about vertical farming, because it's large buildings, you can start putting them closer to urban areas, which would ultimately make it closer to get it to your table. And also, because urban farming it's almost like if you're going to seen a clean room where chips are manufactured, it's almost like that. So you don't have to use pesticides, it's very controlled. So you can be guaranteed that a lot of places, when they go and guarantee that, hey, you don't even need to wash your leafy greens, you can just use it straight off, right? So imagine you have freshly harvested lettuce or kale or something like that, which was taken out of the growing box, and 2 days later you're eating it. That's as fresh as it can get, maybe even within a day, depending on how you manage the supply chain, right? Yeah. So that's why I think I'm very, very bullish about vertical farming.
And it almost seems like to me that we are creating a city for plants, right? In a way, I mean, like how you have skyscrapers for humans.
Instead of thinking about a city for plants, imagine an office for plants.
Yeah.
Where you actually go into a building and you work, where you're farmers who are not like your regular farmers, but very, very high skilled farmers who get paid a lot more because they're able to produce a lot more per person. So you also have farmers who can get paid more, and it gets a lot more complex. And I think I'm very bullish, and I'm very hopeful that this will change a lot of things for the greater good.
Interesting. So how can lab grown meat help then, Shashank?
Oh, okay, that's also interesting. So lab grown meat. The problem with meat is how today, like a lot of people have turned vegetarian or vegan because they don't want to harm animals. Ultimately, meat is just slaughtering it. Like, okay, we as humans are hunters and gatherers, but then from being hunters, we just literally are farming animals and then killing them. So literally, an animal is born today just to die for my food. That is, if you think about it from a very philosophical point of view, that's not great. But also, you think about how animals are raised today. Like, you see a lot of these like factory meat farms where you have pigs or chickens like who are never like let out of their like little coop or the cage, and they grow there, they live in their own feces, and they die, and like they're taken to the slaughterhouse and they get killed. It's just a whole nasty thing, and that leads to a lot of infections. Hey, we're at the time of a pandemic. Foodborne diseases also happen because of unhygienic places of animals being kept there.
Yes.
So it's just that whole way they're grown in an inhuman way is just wrong, right? And the last thing, from an economic and global warming point of view, animals just can't grow naturally, right? You need to feed them. So you again have to take farmland, and they have a lot of farmland that they need, right? So now by having lab grown meat, you're not really feeding something, but you're just growing it in like a culture or a bacteria, right? So that land is again not needed, which is great for helping, not only land, but also water. So it's great in terms of helping with reduction of land overuse and being able to use that land to plant trees, which can become a bigger carbon sink.
Interesting. So same question, but on plant-based meats then, Shashank.
Okay, so plant-based meat, I don't think is the final long-term solution. It is basically like a semi-stopgap. The reason I say it's semi-stopgap is, one, it's plant-based meat will help the world transition from a more meat-based diet to a plant-based diet, which is great because it's a little more balanced. But also, I think lab-grown meat has a long way to go. And because it's a long way to go, I think you need an interim solution, because if you wait for the final absolute perfect solution, I think it's too late. And we're already facing a lot of, global warming based issues, like a lot more powerful hurricanes, a lot more powerful droughts. These things will just get more exaggerated in the next 15 years, and we need a stopgap solution. And this is plant-based meat is a great stopgap solution.
Interesting. Okay. So you've kind of laid out a beautiful model here, Shashank, of vertical farming and lab-grown meat and stuff like that, and you've kind of spoken about the advantages of moving to such a model. Can you talk about, one, whether in the future it would be completely in such a model, whether it would be hybrid, just your thoughts around that? And I guess what will also be helpful is if you could talk about what do you think are the timelines to get to something like this? So, if you have phases or, anything around the journey.
That's a great question, right? I don't think it's going to be like a flick of a switch, but rather it's a slow transition. And let me break this down into two parts. One about vertical farming, and the second about meat, right? So vertical farming, I think we can break it down into 3 stages. The first stage is leafy greens like your kales, your lettuces. It's already happening today. So there are companies like there's something called as Plenty, there is Aero Farms, there's Bowery Farms. These are like the three big ones in the US. There's a bunch happening out of Europe as well, where leafy greens consume a lot of water. It's the easiest, like if you look at software development, we call something as minimal viable product. Where you look at the absolute right conditions, right? So that's what happens with leafy greens. So these are currently being grown. They're not ubiquitous. There's a lot of need for energy. So like lettuce or any leafy green grown in a regular farm versus grown through a lab, through vertical farming. Vertical farm based leafy greens is slightly more expensive. So I think leafy greens will become mainstream maybe 2 to 3 years from now. Hopefully energy cost reduces. Hopefully the government starts giving more subsidies, because farms get a lot of subsidies. These guys don't get any subsidies. This will help them reduce the prices, right? And so that, because ultimately this is where I think we need to go in the future. So that is the first part. The second part is fruits and vegetables, right? Already like things like tomatoes and strawberries have started getting some popularity, but you need more fruits coming in and more vegetables getting grown. People try to figure out like how do we probably modify the genetics, and I'm not anti-GMO, because GMO done for the right reasons are always great. So if they're able to manufacture so that like, hey, the plants are slightly smaller but yield a lot more fruits, and you can figure out how to grow them. So it's a lot more experimentation, and I think getting that to be mainstream would be like 8 to 10 years, I'm assuming, because you'll have different fruits and each of them trying to get like what to take an onion versus a carrot versus a cucumber might be completely different, so like tomato, right? So and then comes, I would look at something called as phase 3 or stage 3, which is grains. Grains are very hard because grains are something where you grow with like water-filled fields and they grow very high. Grains nothing but ultimately seeds. So how do you figure out how do you grow them in the right way? How do you harvest them? Because like wheat, for example, it's nothing but a seed, and the seed initially when it's on the plant is actually juicy and moist. But then we actually try the grains, like how do you handle that whole situation? And that's where stage 3 is, where a lot of the land also is being used, and when that gets handled, that will be where we really start gaining a lot more land. So if you think about like a hockey stick curve, once we start hitting stage 3, we will start recovering a lot more land, or we will start feeding a lot more as the human population moves from like 7 billion to 10 billion or 15 billion, right? So that is the way I look at it. Then there are certain things which I don't think vertical farming can solve, and we should be completely fine with it. Like things grow on trees. Like how we take an olive tree and make it into a vertical farm. Like it's a tree, or an avocado tree. Like, but at least you have more land, you have more resources, so doing these is so much more easier. So that's how I look at the whole thing around the timeline and growth of vertical farming. Now coming to lab grown, again, I want to break it into like 3 different stages. The first stage to think about is just bare grown, like bare protein, like muscles, which are like grinded up. So like things about like having like a chicken nugget, a burger, something like that. It's easy because like you don't need too much of structural integrity, and getting that is a tricky piece. So like get something which is just a meat kind thing, which is like a muscle but in no structural form, and getting that and making that popular. Like there is something called Modern Meadows, and Just is another company where they're trying to bring Just, I think, so just launched their first chicken nugget product in Singapore. I think there are regulations around it. So that is something which needs to be handled. The second stage is getting structural integrity around specific meat cuts, right? So it can still be boneless, but you can still get some kind of muscle tissue. So like imagine lab grown fish, so where you're able to like have like a salmon piece or whatever, right? So that is, and I think that we are probably like 5 to 10 years away from that, right? And then eventually getting like actual bone structure and the actual usage of different kinds of cuts, right? Those things I'm saying 10 to 20 years. So like that's where like you can probably have people can lab grow bones, which you can then use as bone broth in making ramen or whatever, right? Or using that as part of like saying, hey, make a biryani with like a chicken piece with a bone in it. Like those are the things. So I think we're like 15, 20 years away from getting to the utopian land. But yeah, that's how I would break these three things. The other thing is we need to figure out what lab-grown meat is regulation, because the meat lobbying is pushing real hard.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I've known you for a little less than 25 years. In that 25 years, I've known you to be a vegetarian. You seem to know a lot about meat for someone who's vegetarian, Shashank.
Well, I have friends like you who are hardcore meat eaters, so yeah, I pick up a few things here and there.
Yeah. So on that note, I have another question. Is so this ecosystem that you've kind of laid out so well is, I'm sure, extremely complex, and I don't think it's one industry that needs to evolve or transform to kind of make this a success. I think it's multiple industries that kind of need to evolve to make this a success. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that, Shashank?
Oh, sure. So let's start looking at each industry one by one, right? So let's look at the two different main technologies, which is vertical farming and lab-grown meat. So in vertical farming, the thing is they are very, very energy intensive, and hence their costs, as I told you, is not very competitive. So we need to be able to have like energy which is cheaper, but at the same time you can't have it at the expense of the the climate. So you need cheap, sustainable energy. The other one which you need is, because vertical farming uses artificial lighting to create photosynthesis and other reactions.
Yeah.
You need high efficiency light bulbs and LEDs. Already like LEDs have made great progress over the past 10-15 years, and that's why this is becoming more mainstream. But you need a lot more efficiency to be gotten into the system. And hence, the lighting technology is another big industry which needs to be redefined and like push the boundaries. The last thing which needs to be improved, and it's almost like, I don't know if like want to call it improved or it just reset itself, is how the supply chain works. Today, things are stored in silos, the way it is a hub and spoke model. Rather, maybe it's going to change tomorrow because you have like a whole bunch of vertical farms in and around urban areas. You can start seeing the thing from the vertical farm going straight to store, not even like to main distance. Let's say Costco, right? You won't have a vertical farm going from it to like a Costco distribution center in New York or New Jersey and then being sent out to various other Costco stores, but rather saying that, hey, this vertical farm will send X produce directly to, say, the Costco in Edison, or we'll say, oh, this one will send it to the Whole Foods in New York City, like directly, like that. So that would again, then you kind of get rid of like these spaces, and you have to figure out how to repurpose them. So that is around vertical farming. Around lab-grown meat, also, right? I think the biggest issue is like, how do you create technology to help it improve? So like, so you can like iterate faster and figure out how to culture meat properly and stuff. But the biggest industry which has to change is, there's a lot of pushback, as I mentioned, from the meat industry. Like, they don't like milk, for example. They don't want to call it milk, but rather a plant-based substitute or whatever. Or plant-based meat cannot be called meat, but has to be called plant-based thing. And now there's a push saying that you call meat as meat and lab-grown meat as lab-grown meat, right? Which is like, meat is meat, right? But yeah. So those things. So basically, regulations have to be sorted out around that. I think lab-grown meat has more of a people problem, while vertical, actually it has a lot of technological challenges, but it has a more of a people challenge, versus vertical farming has a lot more technological challenges.
Interesting. So one of my favorite things is basically investments, right? So every time I have a conversation, I think of, okay, what are my investment opportunities?
I know that.
And this seems like a very up and coming industry, which basically spans different things, right? It's not just one industry that's going to come up. It looks like it's going to transform a lot of different things. So can you talk around what are investment opportunities for someone like me or anyone else who's listening?
Yeah. So the way you should think about it is let's start with vertical farming. Vertical farming, one of the main areas which is going to be big is lighting solutions, as I mentioned, right? LED. So investing in better lighting solutions would be helpful. So like identifying companies working on making high efficiency LED panels or LED lighting with specific light spectrums and being able to use extremely specific wavelengths so you're reducing the energy used. That's something or like using technology to manage your lighting systems. That is there. Second is sensors, because now vertical farming, you need to like look at a whole bunch of things, try to monitor this in an automated fashion. So sensor manufacturers, chip manufacturers, that's going to be another big area where it's like there's going to be a lot more investment needed, and I think it can grow. As I pointed out, like last mile delivery, like understanding those logistics and handling that, that's going to be a big player. Then again, coming to lighting and energy, how do you create sustainable, cheap energy generation is going to be an interesting player in this. Energy storage, because if you're growing a plant 24/7 in a dark area, like you want to generate energy during the day and maybe store it during the night or whatever. Like, how do you figure that out? Yeah. That's there. Also, like just growing technologies like hydroponic solutions, aeroponic solutions. That's going to be a big game changer. Like that is actually probably the most advanced right now, because funny enough, aeroponic and hydroponic solutions are used for growing weed. But that industry is going to grow a lot more in a whole different way. So that's another area of investment. Lab grown meat, I think there's a lot more like research required, and like creating this, being able to scale that up. I think that is one industry, but a lot of technology around how to experiment fast to figure out different ways, because I think these will be a lot more trial and error rather than what vertical farming does, and trying to get them to market faster would be through great ML solution technology, and that for me is their area of investment for lab grown meat.
Yeah. I just had a quick joke on the weed industry that, it's a growing industry and the potential is very high. But on that note, I think this has been a brilliant conversation, Shashank. Any final thoughts, anything that we're missing, that you want to just remind us about?
Like there are other things which can also happen. Like for example, if you think about animals not getting slaughtered, right? One of the areas which is going to be completely impacted is the hide industry and leather. How is that going to change? That is something which we need to think about, but that's something we can talk about later, because that's a whole different discussion which I can go into the next half an hour.
Oh man. Okay. So I think then I'm going to block some time on your calendar again to discuss that, Shashank. Yeah. At least, the related industries to this that will, that this will have an effect on. But I must say, I think, this was a brilliant conversation as always. I always, like I said at the start, unfortunately, I really enjoyed talking to you, and it's been an amazing conversation. So thank you for your time, Shashank.
Hey, I really enjoyed talking to you as well, Agnel.